welcome to this very special How to Academy event with Sophie Ellis-Bextor and me, Matt Stadlen. I was a presenter on LBC and the BBC and the Telegraph columnist, and now a regular presenter here at How to Academy, and very excited to be getting back on stage shortly, but still really enjoying doing these digital events. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to have Sophie with us. I've interviewed her a couple of times before, and each time really enjoyed it. And I will never forget, as I never tire of telling Sophie, dancing crazily on a sunlit evening back in, I think, the summer of 2000, it must have been possibly 2001, but I think 2000, to Groove Chet at the Notting Hill Carnival. And it was kind of like, I've never been on recreational drugs, but that's kind of how I imagine it must be when it's good. Anyway, it was just really, really an exciting time in British music. And Sophie is one of the spearheads of that. She's had so many high-ranking albums and also singles, and this one, of course, Groove Chet with Spiller, won the race with Victoria Beckham to become the UK #1. It was so exciting, and that was one of the real highlights for me of this new book that Sophie's written, Spinning Plates. It really gave you the sense of drama as it built up to chart day. And Sophie is someone who spins plates. She spins more plates than probably anyone I know. She's got 5 sons. She's this multi-million record selling artist, and she's a really good writer, it turns out, as well. Really direct, to the point, and brings you as the reader along with it, and that's available too. And you can ask questions at the end of the event, ask the questions that I failed to ask, but for now, Sophie, it's really lovely to have you here.
Thank you for that. That's a nice introduction.
And you are in your husband's studio.
Yeah,
Richard, who himself is a well-known recording artist and has worked with you.
Yeah, so Richard and I have worked together a lot over the years, and yes, this is his home studio, which, as I worked at in lockdown, is he has a room that he can go to and seal himself in, which I neglected to do for myself. So this is the space I go to when I don't want to be bothered.
Tell us about the neon light that we can sort of see in the background.
It's over this way. So this is a pink sign that says "Nice Amp," because that is, strangely enough, the first thing I ever said to Richard. Strange, not least because I've literally never complimented an amp before or since. But we met at a rehearsal room. So I was auditioning for a band for my first solo touring band. This is back when Richard and I must have been about 22. And I listened to him play a couple of songs, and then I walked over, and that was how I decided to break the ice.
You described meeting Richard as kind of like having a lightning bolt strike, and he's described it similarly, almost being sort of hit in the face in a positive way by this great force. And that's just so refreshing for so many of the rest of us, that you can really meet someone and just almost immediately know. But you only really knew when you became romantic together, because you'd been friends actually for a while. You were a little bit skeptical, I think, that a friendship could turn into a relationship.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the sort of lightning bolt bit really didn't happen until, we ended up having a kiss during the tour. And up until that point, I just thought of him as a friend, actually. So it was a really very dramatic thing. And I think I'd always been, a bit cynical about the idea of people being friends and then it turning into a romantic thing. I thought, oh, come on, you just know, don't you, if you're hanging out. But I think actually the fact that we were friends first, it was a really good sort of foundation for what came next. Yes.
How did you cope with the idea of being famous when it first started? Because in the book you describe how, and you say it's perhaps not the most normal thing to say, but you do it in such an engaging and modest way. But you say that you kind of thought that you might be famous when you were growing up.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't sure if to write that, but then I thought, you know what, I'm just being honest. And I did used to think, it's not like it sounds really weird, but it's not even like I necessarily wanted that. And I've always, if I ever meet young people that say they want to be famous, I'm always like, oh my God, have context. Like, the fame without any sort of any context, well, I don't even know what that is. Like, it's not a particularly desirable state, I don't think, really. But I think I just always thought I'd end up doing a job that might mean that was part of it, and that I was always practicing my autograph and stuff. And I know it's a really off-putting thing to admit. I do understand that, but I was just really talking about, I was trying to be as honest as possible in this, really, and possibly a little bit too honest at times. But I think, I've never written a book before, and I just was quite instinctive about it, really. And it was really, I enjoyed it a lot more than I was expecting. So that was good.
You start the book by saying that you don't kind of love autobiographies that start too heavily at the beginning.
Yeah.
You do start at the beginning, but you don't muck around. You don't waste much time.
Because it's a bit boring, isn't it? When you get hear like what happened to your great grandparents and all that. I mean, that's fine.
Except, of course, you have got, in the case of your mother, a very, very well-known parent, and in the case of your father, also a very successful person, especially. But before we go any further, just take us back to the beginning of the genesis of this book, because you say you've never written a book before. This is a step into the unknown. Tell us why you suddenly decided to do it, and a little bit more about the fun of the process.
So it actually wasn't that much longer than a year ago that I was approached by Hodder, because I launched a podcast last year called Spinning Plates, where I speak to other working women who happen to be parents about that balance, really, how they, I suppose, what it is to be a modern woman, but also how to recalibrate and find yourself and room for your sort of your own passions in amongst parenthood, which I found, really, they're not always very easy bedfellows. There's a way through it, but I'm still figuring it out a little bit. And so I think Hodder initially were thinking that I'd write something that sort of expanded on some of those themes. So they said, would you like to write a series of essays, and we'll call it Spinning Plates, and it can kind of talk about all these sort of, I suppose, thought pieces, really. And that was really it turns out quite good for my head, because I thought, actually, I can kind of envisage that. And it appealed to me. I thought, oh, yes, it's almost like a series of articles. Only when I started to do it, I thought, what's the point of doing just that? Why don't I just put it all in? And then you've kind of got a mixture. So that's why the book is quite eclectic, in that you've got the through thread of the chronology, but I've also done, I don't know, a chapter on like awful haircuts I've had, or a chapter on panic attacks, or a chapter on my good, bad and ugly experiences live on stage. So I kind of wanted to put everything in there, and it was just really good for how I think, because I think I'm quite easily distracted. I can get very in the zone, but then something might happen and I kind of have to go off and do something else. So I would just write whatever I felt like writing that day. And at first I was very daunted, because they said how many thousands of words they want. I thought, how does anyone do that? But then I ended up getting so into it, I kind of went over that, and I just really enjoyed it. It was a really good space, and I enjoyed being selfish, and being able to just indulge in this really incredibly privileged, indulgent project, because it is pretty indulgent if you're writing about yourself, isn't it? But I really liked it, funnily enough.
I loved it that you started the introduction saying something along the lines of, hello, blank page. Like, it really gave you the sense that we were going to go on a journey with you. Do you ever still pinch yourself and think, my goodness, I've just done an autobiography. People are sufficiently interested in me. I shot to fame like over 2 decades ago now. I was on the Graham Norton show on Friday night, watched by millions. And now I'm like going to go around the country talking about my book, which involves talking about my parents, their relationship, the relationships that didn't go well in your life, the wonderful relationship you have with your husband, what it's like to be a mum to 5. And so, like, do you sometimes pinch yourself?
I feel like that's sort of two strands, really, because on the one hand, the pinch myself of still being able to do the job that I love and people still be interested in what I'm up to, I think I'm very, very aware of how fortunate I am with that. No career is a straight upward trajectory. There's highs and there's lows all the way along. And I started off my career with a record deal straight out of school that I then had been dropped from by the time I was 20. So everything that's happened since then, every time I've got a single out, if anything, I'm a bit Enid Blyton about the whole thing, because I'll have a single out and, you'll get these days of, I don't know, right, you're going to do 16 regional radio interviews. And I'm like, great, that's brilliant that all these places want to speak to me. And I know that a lot of people get a bit sort of, it's very easy to moan about that side of it, but I think it's brilliant. There's so many people doing things. Like, if anyone wants to give me 5 minutes because they're interested in what I'm up to, I think that's not lost on me, that's a great thing, and not always the case. But with the book, I'm a little bit more, having done this podcast where I've interviewed, I don't know, over 40 people, every every other person at least has got a book. So for me, like, probably some people have got like 3 books. I have to always buy books when I've got to interview someone. So no, I think having a book out, like, so it seems like a lot of people have books out.
In a way, it's a great level though, because whoever's written a book, however famous they were to start with, they all kind of really love it, and it's their
Yeah,
little
that's cool.
baby, and they want to tell the world about it, and they want to be interviewed mostly. But what,
Yes.
what I like what you said there about how you're still grateful for anyone who wants to spend 5 minutes with you. That comes across loud and clear, and not just to me as an interviewer, but it must have come across through other interviews as well, because that's my job, to interview famous people, and sometimes, very occasionally, friends will say, "Oh, I love that person," and that's what they say about you. "I love Sophie
Oh,
Ellis-Bextor." They
right.
get genuinely excited about it. You've managed somehow to retain a groundedness through all that, and I wonder whether that's in any way conscious.
A little bit. I do think you have to make a bit of a choice about things sometimes, because I remember when I signed my first solo deal, so I signed to Universal on Polydor's label. I was what's called a priority act. So they gave priority to the album Read My Lips. I was immediately flown around the world and meeting all the heads of all the labels in each region. And it was quite a heady time. And there were other acts that were on the same path as me. And I noticed a lot of them had this look of kind of wearing the cool sunglasses and looking a bit bored with life. And that was almost the stance, that you weren't really supposed to, it was very uncool to be a little bit excited at what was happening. And if you were doing a day of promotion, invariably you'd sit down to talk to, let's say it's an Australian radio host, and he goes, "Oh, you must be sick of this. Are you sick of answering these questions? Are you sick of talking about this?" So it's easier to go, "Oh, you know what? Actually, yeah, it is a little bit tedious." But then I thought it sort of takes more effort. You have to almost flip the switch and go, "No, you know what? I'm really good about this." And a lot of people have, such hard lives, and have had a lot of very charmed experiences. And especially after losing my record deal, I just thought, God, I'm so lucky I get another shot at this, because I really didn't know what else I could do. I've got literally no qualifications. I haven't got any talents in any other area. So I was like, I don't actually know what it is for me. So singing was always it. And just, I'm fortunate that it's in the guise where I'm actually, singing in front of people. That's a good thing.
There's a point, actually, very in between the audience not quite working out as you'd wanted it to.
Mm,
Just the first band you were in, as you
yeah.
said, just straight out of school,
Yeah.
and then your success with Spiller, and then moving into your solo sisters. There was a period where you were kind of making things, right? As
Yeah.
a sort of
Anything.
plan B, an improvised plan B with lots of colours and
Yeah. I made like little bags, and I also tried writing a book that was awful. But I just couldn't really think. I didn't really have my heart in much, but at the same time, I'm quite a simple creature, and so long as I've produced something at the end of the day or the week, even if it's just a meal or painting a new wall or something, it's better for my mental stability, I think. So long as I've produced something, even if it's pretty tiny, really.
and it's a bit about how you do deal with interviews, because you've said that you want to respect the process and be grateful, but as a child you kind of said almost what was coming out of your mind. So and sometimes it would go wrong. I can't remember whether you were 8
Yeah.
or 11, but you were in a bar perhaps in Canada, because you had Canadian great uncle and aunt, and you asked, instead of, what was it, instead of a soft drink you asked for a stiff drink,
Yeah, and everybody
and
kind
you
of
were
laughed, and I felt like I was always coming out with the wrong thing. Yeah, there was another time when we were pulled over. Well, no, my great uncle Bob was talking about being pulled over by a policeman for speeding, and we were in this car, and I just piped up. I would have told him to bugger off, and I was 8 at the time, and the car just went silent, and the shame of that, of blurting something out, and everybody just kind of going, "What she said," which is really weird now, because my kids come out with like way worse on a daily basis. So I don't know if that was slightly generational, or the fact that I was quite often the only child. But yeah, I quite often felt like I was just blurting out the wrong. I mean, it didn't really stop me. I did this like well into my 20s, but I'm probably still now, to be honest. But yeah, it's just an association of immense shame after saying the wrong thing.
You had a manager though, didn't you, with the audience, and he didn't stick around for that long, but he gave you this
No.
piece of advice about not being a rent-a-gob.
Yeah, he was smart about that. I mean, that was Martin Hall, and I've got a good relationship with him. He's still a manager now. And yeah, he stopped working with me the week Groovejet came out, which was kind of quite stressful. But he just didn't really get dance music and was like, look, I'm an indie kind of manager, so off you go into the world and good luck with it. But I'm getting out of this one. But yeah, he did say, I recommend that you don't be rent a quote, which actually was really good advice. I thought, I don't really want that. I don't really want them to come looking for me when they need someone to say something controversial.
It didn't stop you saying, I don't know whether this was before or after, I think it's probably, he said that before, but it didn't stop you therefore saying something about what you might have called your child when you were up against Victoria Beckham.
That's true, but then I think...
What was the quote? Tell us the quote.
Well, that was because in the press, they did this thing, one of the Red Tops, I can't remember which one, did like we were boxers, so they kind of pitted us against each other, Victoria Beckham and I. So it would be like our names and our, if I had a boyfriend and all this stuff. And so I was trying to make fun of that, really, saying, because she just had a baby and called him Brooklyn, and I said, I should have said I've got a kid called Chiswick. And I can see retrospectively how she might have thought I was having a dig at her, but really I was trying to make fun of the press thing. But I found, to be honest, that whole time very intimidating. So I probably was just trying to put some more weight into my feet, because I was really feeling quite freaked out, because she was a Spice Girl and so famous, and I was just this person who'd just come off the back of a failed record deal and having a go at doing something different. So it was quite intimidating.
But she was sweet to you, wasn't she? I mean, she kind of took the whole thing well, and she left you a note, I think, with David Beckham, didn't she?
Yeah.
Like Sunday or whatever.
Yeah, her and Dane Bowers, actually. Yeah, they did leave a little, good luck. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it was off. I mean, I think, if anyone knows how the press work, it's Victoria Beckham, and she was very savvy to that and wise to it. So yeah, I think, if anything, I just think it must have been really annoying for her, because she was releasing a solo single and everybody just kept going, oh, is it going to be number one or not? That must have been really frustrating.
So if you said a moment ago that you were an only child, but of course you were an only child at the beginning. Your mum and dad, I think went their separate ways when you were about 4, and you described some moments of remembering when your parents were together. But they then created successful second marriages, both of them.
Yeah.
You were close to both step parents, and they then had different sets of children. So you've got quite an impressive collection of siblings, like I think 5 or 6 in total.
Yeah, so yeah, I've got 3 sisters and 2 brothers, and yeah, particularly close on my mum's side to my stepdad and my brother and sister on that side, because we all grew up in the same house. So yeah, I did end up being part of a big sprawling family.
And I wonder whether that almost conditioned you, because you were, as an 8-year-old, you had one of your siblings on your knee, and you were you loved the experience, is what came through from reading the way you put it.
I did.
And then you would go on to have 5 children yourself, and you were pregnant. You found out you were pregnant with Richard. What, 3 months or something into that relationship?
Not even that. 6 weeks. We've been dating for 6 weeks. It was a little bit crazy, but yeah, luckily had a happy ending. But definitely the idea of being a mum was something I always liked the idea of. And yeah, you're right. Jack, my little brother, was born when I was 8, and I was absolutely obsessed with him. So yeah, there's always been a chubby baby in the family, and now my youngest is 2. So I'm really trying to apply some pressure to the siblings, because I don't want to. I'm not sure I want to pick up the baton again. I've done it enough times now.
Jack would go on and work with you, right? Be part.
Yeah, he drums with me. Yeah.
How is that working with a sibling?
Oh, I love it. I mean, the nice thing about Jack being in my band drumming and Richard being in the band when he can playing bass is that we've all got very distinct roles. So it's actually just really nice. You're with people that you like. I'm friends with the rest of the band too. I think it's really healthy to have a good relationship with people in lots of directions, and like working together, and we all do what we do. We don't really tread on each other's toes with it, so it's really nice, and you can share the experiences as well, which is good.
This is a How To Academy event, so there's an element, or there can be an element of a how to, right? That obviously
marry people or be related to them and then work with them.
It does come in quite handy to have a husband like Richard, though, because the moment you discovered that you were pregnant, he was on the phone to one of his bandmates, I think, telling him how to sort out a technical problem, and you then presented the positive pregnancy test to him. And when you logged on to Zoom this evening, it was actually the first person I saw was Richard, because he was sorting out the tech for you. Which is
I mean, I can like work Zoom on my own computer, but we thought it would be good if I was in his studio. And I sometimes think, I mean, look, Richard is a completely brilliant person when it comes to the tech side of things. And when we did our kitchen discos, he did all of the sound and the tech for that, which was actually phenomenal. I think what he did was really, really amazing. But there's also a slight element of he does it really well. So I've sort of purposefully not learned how to use very much of it, because then if I learn how to use a bit of it, then I'd have to start doing it. Like we've got an amazing coffee machine in our kitchen, and I'm not going to learn to use it because I want to make sure that he always makes my coffee.
Well, it's very sweet you say in the book that you're not one for grand sweeping gestures necessarily of romance, so you certainly don't insist on it. But if someone makes you a tea unasked for, that sort of thing floats your boat.
Yeah, I'm really into that kind of stuff, definitely. And I think it's always helpful as well if you've just got a fundamental, you like each other, and a slight boundary of what's an acceptable way to talk to each other. I think that's really healthy, actually. And possibly something that some people, it's very easy to fall into bad habits with it. But I think if either of us feel like we're being a bit snappy or we've been a bit rude or a bit off, we'll just say, look, that's not really cool. Let's not do that. And then we sort of, just rein it back in a bit, which helps us a lot when there's a lot of stuff going on. Yeah, you have to like each other, I think.
So given that we're in the how-to section of our conversation,
Yes.
how do you, for any of our viewers who might be considering going on Strictly Come Dancing,
yeah,
how do you deal with the Strictly curse, which is something that you address?
So the reason we were talking about the Strictly stuff is because it was just a very intense experience, and so much of Strictly was incredible. It took so many things I've always loved, like music and dancing and sparkly stuff and amazing makeup and lights and live band, and put it all, turned up to 10. It was, intoxicating. But with it, I was swept into Strictlyville, and Richard was kind of left on the outside. And we are a couple that do a lot of things. We do work separately on things, of course, but we've never really had an actual line that isn't crossed between those worlds. It's always been, I'm going to go off and do that. And if I need, not that I want to go and watch him rehearse with the feeling, but, I can if I want to. But with Strictly, it was much more, there was one side of it and then everybody else on the outside. So I think that was the thing that threw us a little bit from the get-go, but also the fact that we'd never seen the show. So suddenly I'm signed up to this program where I think I'm just going to learn how to waltz. And almost immediately, you'd be meeting up with friends and people would turn to Richard and go, oh, you're not worried she's going to run off with the dancer. And it just became a very normal way for people to talk to us for months on end. And I think for my part, obviously that was never a possibility in my head, but I could also see that I was so focused on learning, and then the adrenaline of the performance, and then the come down on Sunday and then Monday back in the dance studio learning a new one. There wasn't really a lot of myself left over at the end of the days to kind of be, really present. I would come home and the kids would be talking to me and I'd just be kind of zoning out, because I don't really know how to compare it to anything. It's like learning for a test at the end of every week. And, it's something you really want to do well in. And it's incredibly, heady, and everything is kind of ramped up. And the nerves, I've never experienced anything like it. But then the come down on the other side of that is exhausting because of all that adrenaline that's been in your system. And then you go in on Monday and it's a whole new dance. So everything hangs in the balance right again. It doesn't matter how good your Paso Doble is, what's your Charleston like. It's just, it's loopy, it's exciting. But yeah, I think Richard just found it really hard because people were always being like, oh, well, that's the end of that then. She's going to run off and you'll never see her again. And meanwhile, his wife comes home and she is a bit like of a zombie. So I think it was just really tough time. I mean, I never thought anything bad was going to happen. I was just aware that it was intense.
Do you go out of your way as a loving partner at that point to kind of reassure?
Of course, yeah, but there's just a bit of I was also feeling wobbly because I'm involved in something where I might be knocked out any minute. So I'm trying to hold on to the learning and trying to be good. I wanted to do well. I wanted to get through the dances, not just for me, but there's a lot riding on it. And you've got Brendan, who is a brilliant partner. Actually, I really enjoyed working with him, but he cares about it. And so you go to work and it's all like, right, and then the stakes get higher. It's like, okay, it's the quarterfinal, it's the semi-final. So I think it was just, yeah, some of it was just glorious, and other bits were just, it's like stepping into some wacky world, you know. And even, you know, I'd literally be walking on the street, and I don't know, there'd be some like guys on the scaffolding, and they go like, "What's your dance this week?" You know, it turned London into a village, and I've just never really done anything quite like that. I mean, I don't think there is another thing like it. But if my, you know, my mum's been asked to do it sometimes, and I've always said, "Oh, I think you'd love it." There's so much of it that's lovely, but it's just, yeah. I think the tip, my how-to would be involve people. Bring, I mean, Richard used to come along to rehearsals. My friends used to come along. So involve people. That's good advice. That was Brendan's advice, actually. It was good advice.
And it's a competition, so like you're having sort of almost you are having to be competitive. And just very briefly, last word on that: did you feel more pressure because you came from the background that you came from as a singer and somebody who dances on stage?
No, actually, I didn't feel pressure from that. I felt more pressure just from my own sense of really enjoying it, and I loved learning, and I wanted to be good at the dances. You know, if when it goes right, it's like the best feeling. So you're always wanting to achieve that, and luckily for me, that was the experience. The actual dancing bit was just, yeah, that was pretty pure. That was pretty just good, I'd say.
Okay, so a bit more how to, like, given the title of your book is
Mm,
Spinning Plates.
yeah.
How on earth do you do it? I mean, my life's stressful enough, and I don't have children.
Well, everybody's life has got an element of that, I think. And I always think about with the kids, it's a bit like, you know, when you get those magicians foam balls, and they have like, I don't know, a canister, and you could put in two balls and that fills that space. But if you squish in four more, they'll all fit in as well. And I feel like with the kids, you've kind of got a place in your head that's like for family stuff, and then however many kids you're, more foam balls you're pushing in. Like if you've got one kid, five kids, it's the same amount of stuff. You'll just make that fill that space, I think. And maybe if it's not kids, it's something else. We've all got things we care about, and trying to shift our priorities. And we're living obviously in a time where we're used to being accessible and available to everybody all the time, and that comes with its own burden, doesn't it, sometimes? But overall, my main tip on that was really just that I think if you actually love or are passionate about all the components, then you do make more time for things, and you find the energy for stuff. Um, but yeah, I think in a lot of ways I'm still working out how to get the bit that's just for me. That's the thing that I in lockdown I realized I didn't really have a lot of that, and that's something I've been trying to recalibrate a bit.
And you say that in the book, and in some ways, the book is about how you've managed to change, how you've reprioritized,
Yeah.
and also, of course, how you've now given a voice to your younger self. And we'll come to that.
Hmm.
When I interviewed you for my 5 minutes, you used a word that I'd never, to my shame, ever heard about before, and I probably
What
still pronounce it wrongly this
what
time.
was that?
Preeclampsia.
Oh yes, yes,
And
preeclampsia. You said it just right.
like, it is,
Uh,
you have like high blood pressure.
Yeah, so it's a
Pregnant.
medical condition. I mean, to be fair, there's probably tons of medical conditions I've never heard of or know how to pronounce. And I wouldn't know about it if it hadn't happened to me. But yeah, so I had preeclampsia with my first two babies in my first two pregnancies. And essentially, it's your body trying to reject the placenta, because the placenta is a new organ that forms during pregnancy. And as a consequence, it's sort of slightly bespoke in each person, each woman that comes down with it. But so for some people, they can have it quite mildly, have some pills to monitor your blood pressure, and you make it through your pregnancy fine. For other people like me, it can start and then just ramp up very, very quickly. And it comes from the Greek, I think eclampsia, the word comes from coma, the Greek for coma. So if you leave it untreated, it's a reason why a lot of women in the olden days used to die in their first childbirth or during their first pregnancy, because you suddenly you go into a coma, and then you die. So you know, that didn't happen because of the wonders of modern medicine and being monitored and everything. But yeah, that's what happened with my first two.
And you went through that twice and still had a further three
I know,
children.
which I can see is a bit barking.
Well, we're talking about,
You know, my mind works in really weird ways. I mean, even holding my third baby in my arms, I remember saying to the consultant, you know, how would it be if I had a fourth? And I've had 5 C-sections. Like, I don't even think that's, well, it's fine. Obviously, I'm all right, but I'm not sure it's like totally recommended. I think
well,
I just turn down the volume on the good advice when I need to, probably.
you've written very candidly about your panic attacks, which
Mm,
I found really interesting as someone who has suffered from anxiety. And I think it's really helpful that you talk about it, because if someone of your stature, someone who is so outgoing and such a performer and has given so much pleasure to so many people, can go through that and come out the other side. I think
Oh
it's really
yeah,
important for people to know. So take us through that a little bit, and the role that Paul McKenna
I
played.
know, I know. Well, firstly, I think, with all these things, and I agree that it's important to talk about these things. I just don't know when it ever doesn't help to talk about that sort of stuff, really. I think we've got a lot better, haven't we, with our vocabulary and the space we give things to do with your mental health. And definitely for me, the panic attacks, oh, they were horrible when they were happening. I'm very fortunate. I sometimes might feel a little bit of it, the sort of echo of it, but I haven't had a full blown attack since I was in my 20s. And initially, I didn't even know what was happening to me. I'd never heard of panic attacks. So I thought I was actually going mad. I thought they were the first signs of me falling into some weird abyss of insanity and I wasn't going to be able to pull myself out of it. And then my mum, who's always good at me now, she's like Dr. Google, but then I don't know, she must have read it in some book or article or something. But she said, I've been reading about this and I think that's what they are. I think they're these panic attacks. So the recommended way of dealing with it was hypnotherapy. I did have a friend that suggested using beta blockers, but I didn't want to be reliant on anything because I thought if I get that in that, then sooner or later I'm going to be without whatever that crutch is, and then they're just going to come back. I wanted to be able to just deal with it within myself. So yeah, I went to see one hypnotherapist and it didn't work. I felt a bit freaked out. She put on some weird, massage type music, and I was like, oh god, like this is literally, I could feel myself kind of getting panicky just being there. And then someone recommended Paul McKenna, who at the time was already incredibly famous, and he used to do a lot of TV programs and books all about how his hypnotherapy could change your life. But he was always quite showbiz, so I was quite surprised that he was doing these private appointments. And I went along to see him, and it was a one-off appointment, and he was just brilliant. He just kind of obviously said what needed to be said, and it really resonated with me. And I never had another full-blown panic attack after that. So that was probably about 23, 22, 23 around then.
He asked you to imagine yourself, didn't he, in a sort of black and white screen in the corner of the room, the
Mm.
first point where you felt anxiety.
Yeah, he asked me to talk about a time when I felt out of control, because for me, my panic attacks were always synonymous with feeling that I was feeling just out of control, and I'm not someone that deals with that very well. I like to feel quite grounded, like that makes me feel centered. And yeah, so I could think of when I was small, and my parents would always be divvying up the school holidays, and if there was an odd number of nights in my school holidays, then it would become, I'd be sort of almost asked quite directly if I'd want to be with my mum or my dad. And yeah, I found that quite intense when I was small. So I think that's what I went back to, just feeling like being about, I don't know, 6 or something, and just trying to say what would make them happy, but also answer the question honestly. It's just, a skill you learn, I guess.
And I think it was very poignant that you said that you were pleased you did address this and get help, but help that worked for you, and different
Mm.
things clearly work for different people. But
Yeah.
had you not got that help, there might have been things further down the line that you
Oh,
just would have had to opt
definitely.
out of.
I think I would have stopped a lot of stuff, because I started getting panic attacks when I was doing TVs, and yeah, it was a horrible feeling, like live tellies, or be about to, even doing a pre-record, but it was the feeling of claustrophobia. They put the radio mic on you, and then you'd be on set, and all the lights are a bit bright, and everybody's made up, and everything just looked a bit once removed from reality. So that would always be the starting point. And then just the fact that I'd be having to do an interview, and then I couldn't leave, and it would be very conspicuous if I did leave, and maybe there'd be other guests on, and they're big, stars, and that would be scary. This started when I was probably about 19, 20. And then by the time Murder on the Dance Floor came out, yeah, I was feeling very wobbly around then, just because everything was kind of running away with itself. So yeah, for me, I think if I hadn't sorted it out, I probably would have become a bit reclusive, really, just because it's such an uncomfortable feeling. You just feel like, why am I putting myself through it? I can't do it.
You described the difference between anxiety of that nature and then just nerves. There's a pre-performance,
Oh,
a different.
very different feeling. Yeah, I mean, nerves are a sort of, you sort of channel the fizziness, and obviously there's a bit where you're so nervous you feel like, I don't know if I'll be able to do the job, but it's not really, it doesn't feel like panic. It feels like a legitimate reason to be scared. Like the nerves I had on Strictly, like, well, of course you feel absolutely freaked out. Like, who wants to dance, a foxtrot live on telly in front of 12 million people when you've only started learning on Monday? Like, that's a normal time to be a bit nervous, I'd say. But yeah, with the panic, it feels like it's out to get you more, and it feels like you're not in sync with the world around you, that you feel like it's disproportionate, that you should be able to handle it in a way that you are not. On Strictly or equivalent things, you can say, oh my God, I'm so nervous. And people go, don't worry, you'll be fine. But if you're just sitting down to do an interview and you say, oh my God, I'm so nervous, you feel like you're not acting in a way that's centered or grown up. You feel like you're letting everybody see the inside of you. And once that gets out of its box, you feel like you're not going to be able to get it back in. You're just going to run away from the building and not come back.
Some of the things we're talking about might give people the sense that life is just incredibly difficult. And of course, we all have challenges, but there's been so much joy and fun and pleasure in your life. And as I've said, you've given so much fun to other people. So I want to talk about the joy of performance, and also, of course, the kitchen discos that help people through the lockdown. But because I want to sort of end on a high before we take audience questions, let's talk about one or two of the more challenging things, others of the more challenging things that you write very intimately about in the book. And one was a relationship that you describe as controlling. And again, this is quite a brave thing to talk about, because we're developing, aren't we, as a society, a new language for relationships. We now understand more than perhaps we did in the old days what isn't acceptable, and the word controlling is a really important part of that, is my sense. Doesn't mean it wasn't always wrong, but we're kind of now beginning to understand it so we can call it out more quickly.
Oh, definitely. We're much more aware of that stuff. Yeah, and we talk about red flags and possessive things, and yeah, I think we've just understood that actually there's a language of love that lifts you up and supports you, and there's a language of it that's actually quite restrictive and damaging, and that you're okay to look for one and to run from the other.
You say that as a consequence of that relationship, it helped you to appreciate the brilliance of your marriage, although you would have appreciated it anyway, of course. But
yeah,
just, you go into a lot of detail in the book, but give us just a sense of how difficult those years were, because it was this kind of cruel juxtaposition. On the one hand, you were being turned into a star, and this was, Groovejet. You talk us through the process of Groovejet, and when you sort of trialed out at the top line and so forth to Spinner's Track, which was already a hit in the clubs, and all this excitement and this whirlwind. But at the same time, you were in this relationship that you were desperately trying to make work, but actually quite clearly wasn't working.
Yeah, and like you say, look, my life has not been. It has been mostly happy, but I just thought, there's a lot of stuff that I could have written an autobiography that's more like a kind of like a version of a Wikipedia page, like, and then this happened, that happened. But I thought I just didn't really understand the point of that, and part of that is also about getting older. And I don't think it's necessarily brave to write about these things. I think it's more like it's quite powerful. I don't know. I feel like I always thought there'd be a point in time when the right question would be asked and I'd be able to talk about it, because I do think a lot of people have been in similar dynamics. Certainly after some excerpts of the book have been published in the press, I've had people messaging me, some really close friends, some people I don't know, saying, oh golly, yeah, that's exactly what I experienced as well, and men and women. And so I think, I was in a relationship for many years that was really unhealthy, I think, in the dynamic. But weirdly, I think at the time, firstly, I think I thought if there was a way to fix it, there'd be a way to make it good. And when I realized that everything about it kind of shrunk very quickly, made it much easier to sort of get over the whole thing, because the power of it had sort of gone once. It was almost like, like the scales fall from your eyes kind of thing. But I think also the juxtaposition of what was happening with the album and the success of the album, there was probably a part of me that felt like, I don't know, that there was some sort of, it sort of made sense that you go home and have someone being like, well, don't think you're all that. Don't think that you're that special. Your singing's out of tune and you're getting older. And I thought, oh yeah, no, that's actually probably the other side of the coin and what I need to hear, because at work everybody be, you know, it's all about lifting it up. So it probably at the time made sense to me in a weird way. I didn't really understand. I think I was just quite young about it, and I didn't really understand that when you're older and everybody around you is more collaborative and supportive, it just gives you space to breathe. I think I just forgot about that really.
Sounded like you were making excuses for it as well because you wanted it to work.
Oh, I really wanted it to work desperately, yeah, and I put a lot of energy into that, definitely.
Well, I mean, you were told, you write in the book that you weren't allowed to look out the window of the car, for example.
Yeah, I think that was by sort of the last year or so. I think it's a little bit like the whole, you know, analogy of the frog being put in cold water and it gets to boiling point. You don't necessarily notice the shift in dynamic getting more and more intense until you start to look back. But certainly by the time that we'd moved into the last place that we lived in together, I felt very isolated. It was very unhappy. Um, yeah, just quite dark, really. But then no one ever says anything, and then you just think, oh well, that's kind of normal. You don't think you notice necessarily yourself. You're a bit up. It's a bit up close, isn't it?
We're talking a lot at the moment as a society about male violence and male behaviour, and something
Mm.
else you discussed in the book when you were, I think, 17
Mm.
was when you were raped.
Mm.
And again, this is incredibly powerful because people probably still, some people unfortunately still need to be reminded that that act is not just perpetrated by people wearing balaclavas, but
Yeah,
it can happen on a date.
yeah, and I think, as you said before, the language we've got. I mean, it's for me. I still do flinch a little bit because the I when I wrote about it, I tried to write in quite I suppose it's quite nuanced in that I didn't necessarily say that. I mean, I do in another paragraph, so I'm not like backing away from the word rape, and I understand that, you know, it was sort of when I was older that I understood that it was actually was what it was, because at the time I just felt like, I mean, I think the way I put it was like there were two people in the room, one said yes, one said no, and the yes person did it anyway. And I think at the time it took me really, I was a bit like, oh, I should probably be fine with this, because all that happened was he just did that and I didn't really want to, but it was going to happen sooner or later. And I'd had a previous experience with another guy where we'd kind of got up to the, you know, nearly that point, and I'd gone, actually no, and he'd been really annoyed with me, and he had stopped, but he'd also been like, oh, you've got a problem with your sexuality if you're not going to do that. So I think I just thought, okay, now I've done the thing. Like I didn't want to, but I almost blame myself, like, I should have been okay with it. Why wasn't I okay with it? So I think it took me a long time to kind of understand why it wasn't okay, and hopefully it'll help some people. And I know that there's some people that have written to me about that and said, you know, that, as you said as well, we have the language better now, and it is quite empowering to actually speak about things. You know, it's not, I thought it might be like, I wasn't sure if it was going to be sort of, I don't know, scary to open up these boxes in my head that have been just in my head for a while, but actually it weirdly feels like a nice resolve, like a resolution. There's a lot more people listening to me now than just that one guy who didn't listen to me then. That's a nice conclusion when I can actually maybe share the conversation broader and maybe change things a little bit. I'm fine with that.
And do you feel, as a mum of 5 boys now, that you can do your very best to ensure that a different generation grows up differently? And I mean, of course,
Yeah.
we're not tarring all men from that generation with the same brush by
No.
any means. Of course, we're not. But do you feel kind of now that you have the language to help your boys be the best men they can be?
Yeah, I'm definitely having a go. That's completely my intention, and also to make sure that they're part of both sides of that equation as well, because I don't want them to compromise themselves, and I want them to feel happy and be in relationships where they feel it's that their emotional needs are catered for as well. And I'm sort of trying to tread that balance, really, of just making sure that, I suppose, that they're in something that's healthy and good and kind, because I think that's always what you'd want for all the people you love.
Let's talk about all the fun things quickly.
Yeah,
So
go on.
we have talked about fun already, but you seem to me to be a very happy person. You laugh a lot, which is
I'm a happy
great,
person.
and
Yeah.
your husband laughs a lot, and this is all good stuff. But I saw on Instagram before it went down. I think it went down just before we came onto this event. and I saw that you had performed, I don't know, at a friend's 40th or something, in between doing two gigs, which reminded me about the book, part in the book when you were really young and Groove Jet had just become a hit, and you toured the country going to all these different nightclubs, and your manager would
Yes.
sit outside drinking or sit inside drinking Red Bull or whatever. It was this
Mm.
crazy tour, and it was exciting, and it was putting money in your bank account. But you still do these sort of fun things. You're sort of, it strikes me that this is a combination of modesty and you know, a wanting to be sort of, you know, not shut yourself away from people, to be kind, to be giving, and be generous with your talent and your fame, but also the sense that you really love it as well. So we talked about the anxiety, and we talked about
Mm.
panic attacks and the nerves, but tell us about what it's like in that moment on stage, whether it's a small club or a big venue, and you're really into it. Kind of
Oh
paint that
yeah.
picture for us.
Well, I think, yeah, my love affair with what I do and with music, if anything, it's stronger than ever. Um, and that is in no small way thanks to the kitchen discos, really, because it kind of that took it back to the purity of just what it's like to perform and to be able to use music as a way to change a mood. Like, it's such a powerful thing, music. It's wonderful, and it's just been my friend from the get go. I absolutely adore it. And I mean, you know, even today, walking home from school with my 5-year-old, and we played a bit of music off my phone, and suddenly we're both dancing down the street, and we're really happy. And that's the power of a good song, the right thing at the right time. And yeah, I do love what I do. I love singing. I love writing songs. Um, I love the storytelling in it. And I think particularly, yeah, through the kitchen discos, I kind of rediscovered the real kernel of what it is I love about what I do. So yeah, I've been very happy to get out to performing again. I've been having some amazing gigs. The crowds have been so adorable. They've been so up for it. I don't know. I think I was a bit worried people would be a bit shy, but they're not. They've been kind of louder and more smiley than ever. And it's just good to see everyone, isn't it?
Oh, it's just amazing to see everyone. And
Yeah.
during that time when you were entertaining us with the kitchen disco, I mean, it was such fun because your whole family kind of took part, didn't they? There were boys sprawled over the
Yeah.
kitchen floor, and Richard was kind of helping out and, as you say, recording stuff. I mean, as well as bringing fun and relief to the rest of us, it was good fun for you, right?
Definitely good distraction, good tonic, but also really good for the stress. Not just for me and Richard, but for the kids too, because they'd be allowed to dress up in silly outfits, jump up and down. We'd always make it a Friday night thing, so we'd finish our disco, and then the kids, you know, would stay up late and watch a movie while Richard and I would have a cocktail and maybe get a takeaway, and yeah, just tried to make it a bit of a anchor drop of like, right, another week. That felt good. It would give us like the rush of endorphins. So yeah, it was definitely really special. I mean, it'd be really interesting to see what the kids' memories of it will be when they're older. And I think for my littlest one, Mickey, I think it's like hardwired that he loves music and performing. He's got a soundtrack to pretty much everything he does. He loves it very much, and you know, no wonder he came on tour with me when he was 4 months old, and then when he's like 14 months old, we start doing these weekly gigs from his playroom. So I don't know what he makes of the whole thing.
Just a quick how-to moment for any aspiring writers in the audience.
Mm,
Again, with 5 children and everything else that's going on in life, and
mm.
there was lockdown as well, so there's presumably homeschooling. How did you keep the discipline?
Do you mean with writing the book?
Yeah,
I just got into like a little rhythm. My mum was really helpful. So my mum, she actually signed her first book deal when she was 60, and she's written 2 non-fiction books since then, and they're brilliant. And she's basically my fountain of all good advice. So when I spoke to her about the book, she said, look, you know, don't feel you have to imagine your life is different if you're a writer. Just make the writing fit around you. So what I decided to do with that is that yeah, Monday to Friday I'd take the little ones out in the morning. We go and feed the ducks, go for a walk. This is all during the homeschooling months, so this is sort of January through to the end of March, and then get back, have lunch, and then the afternoon they'd sit down either with our nanny or with Richard and do the school stuff, and I would just squirrel away upstairs and just write for as many hours as I could before someone came and got me, really. So up until supper time, maybe. So like 5, their supper time, so like 5ish. But that was it. I just would do that every day. So I didn't need tons. Well, I guess it's, you know, enough time, but that was also quite good for my head, because it meant I also would go out in the morning and you'd be thinking about things, and yeah, and then sometimes I'd just be looking at stuff online and trying to remember stuff, and checking dates, and yeah, it's quite funny to go back and look at a lot of that stuff, like the late 90s stuff and all that was really funny.
We've got
So,
almost to the end of an hour together, and we haven't mentioned really your mum, but
my mum.
obviously a massive part of your life, and was very, very famous when you were little. So I'm almost exactly the same age as you, but I wasn't allowed to watch telly until I was about 7. So I don't really know.
Wow.
I didn't really know about your mum, but she would be on Blue Peter. She'd sometimes take you in. She
Mm,
would be mobbed by people your height,
mm.
and there was lots of great stuff about it. Like your mum would be broadcasting to millions of kids, and then she'd come back to you.
Yeah,
You were also quite entrepreneurial. Like you go and sell Blue Peter badges in the playground,
yeah.
and if your mum had signed them, you get, instead of 50p, you get £1, and it was really fun reading about all that sort of stuff. Just super quickly, tell us about, because I mean your dad was also, as I said in my introduction, hyper successful. He's worked with Eric Clapton, a big filmmaker. Worked with Eric Clapton, worked with the royal family, done all sorts of things,
Yeah.
won awards and so forth. And you're obviously close to both of them, but just tell us what it was like as a little person with a super famous mum.
Well, I haven't really got much to compare it to. You know, you only know what family you have, right? But I do think, well, I suppose Blue Peter and TV, the stuff that she was doing was from when I was tiny. The first job she did, I think I was only maybe a couple of months old, and she was in Doctor Who. She did the Sweeney. Then she did a thing called Jigsaw, which is another presenting job from when I was probably about 2. So Blue Peter came along when I was 4, but she'd already been doing a lot of telly by then. Um, and I think, I don't know, I suppose I think it gave, I saw, you know, she was always happy when she was working. And luckily it was something I could watch as well. So I just think it was like that. I always thought of it like another sibling, really. And I had a very strange experience when Blue Peter turned 60, and I went and sung on the show, and my mum introduced me, which was really cute. But they had all these, pretty much any Blue Peter presenter that could make it was there. And it was just weird for me because there was a lot of people I hadn't seen for years, and like the old editor and Biddy Baxter and all these people. And I was like, oh my God, these are like the extra people from my childhood. It was very surreal. But yeah, there was just always Blue Peter for pretty much the whole time when my mum was a single mum. So from when she split up with my dad up until when she got together with John. So yeah, it was that was the gap. It had that theme tune.
People sometimes ask me, with having had a successful dad, whether I ever sort of was competitive with him or felt pressure to kind of do what he did, and I didn't. Is the honest truth. I just wonder, with you having a famous mum and also a successful dad, whatever success means, but you know what I mean.
Mm.
Did you, was that part of the sort of tapestry of your life, or did you cut yourself off from that and you were just forging your own path?
Yeah, I think probably that, really, just do my own thing. I think also because music was always my thing, that felt that felt like it was always my own, and I could really let my parents know about it through my own voice. So I could say, you know, that I introduced them to that whole world. They didn't know the music scene at all. Um, so I think probably from the time I was a teenager and Britpop came along, which changed the emphasis of my record collection from stuff that my dad had introduced me to things I was finding for myself. I think from then I was just pretty independent, to be honest, and just getting on with it and running off into the night and the time before mobile phones, which is great. So I was just kind of off doing my own thing. That's why I moved out at 18. I was just, bye. Yeah.
One more quick
I was the daughter you don't want, like a lot of dads don't want, basically, just running off and going clubbing and turning up later than I said I'd be and that kind of stuff.
Just before we hattle through some Q&A questions, just one more thought from me, when we could ask you questions for another hour. But interesting, because you talk about how it's quite an interesting hybrid experience you described. So on the one hand, you were clearly quite confident. You thought you had views on how the world should be as a teenager and all that. And so, you know, you weren't a shrinking violet by any means, but you were also quite self-conscious. You weren't convinced of your own looks. I mean, you went on to become a model, and you're obviously beautiful, but you weren't really aware of that at the time, when at sort of quite formative age, and you thought you were a bit gawky or whatever. One of the things that struck me in the book was, and I went on Google to try and find out who he was and or she, and don't tell us who it was, but I couldn't find them. And you said that when you were presenting an award at Brits, that the presenter said, "Why the wide face?" to you, and it just struck me as such a bizarre thing for someone to say. And I wonder whether you feel that we've become a kinder society and a more respectful society in some ways. And I can't imagine that sort of remark being made on telly today, or whether because of social media, in some ways, we've actually gone backwards.
Oh, I mean, The honest answer is I'm not really sure. I think there's definitely a lot of examples of good that's come out of things and self-awareness, but the I think sometimes it's on quite a case by case basis. And I mean, I saw this week, Katie Price's mum put a post up on her Instagram saying, you know, please can the press be kind to my daughter, because it wasn't that long ago that hashtag be kind was trending, and now you don't want to only realize your folly when it's gone wrong, and that's what I'm worried about. She put it really eloquently, and I don't know, I think we still, it's yeah, it's a bit of both, I think, but I do think we are definitely better at finding forums where you can get support and find the kindness, and I think that's much better now. That access and that communication and finding those communities is definitely easier and stronger, I think.
I'm going to ask you this question from an anonymous attendee who says, Richard has a studio space. Where is your personal space?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I had to like ban myself from talking about my podcast basically, because I realized I was always interviewing these amazing women, and at some point going, I just wish I had my own room. I was like, I have to stop going on about that. It's not going to happen. I think, yeah, I don't really have my own space, but I have got better at letting the house know that my work is okay to prioritize. And that is something that I only blame myself for before. I used to really downplay it. And now I'm better at being like, no, I've got this work and it's important. So, you know, I need to make room for it.
Okay, I want to ask you something that's way over my head, but Twitch is a popular online tool apparently for DJs, says Diane, and artists. Would you use it alongside live events to make hybrid events for your fans?
Well, I've never really I've heard of Twitch, but I've never used it myself. And no, I'm a little bit, I'm a little bit rubbish really. I've sort of I mean, Instagram worked pretty well for the discos. I've had like a few dipping my toe in the water of TikTok, but TikTok for me is a bit like walking into a shop where you feel like, I don't think I'm the clientele they're really expecting to walk in. I've always feel a bit like it's sort of slightly come into the wrong room. But Instagram is comfy and familiar. I've kind of worked out that one all right for myself, but maybe if I work with someone clever who helps me with the Twitch stuff. But I think for me personally, I'm probably a bit lazy really. Yeah.
I don't think I've even heard of it, but you've got well over 300,000 Instagram followers and well over 200,000 Twitter followers. So I think you're doing just fine. Carmen said, I'm trying to write a children's book. What's a good routine for this? As I have demanding kids and a husband and seems like no spare time. Also, any hiccups when you wrote your book?
Oh, well, firstly, I totally sympathise. And with the children's book, I mean, you're doing something so lovely. Just tell them to leave you alone. It's important to you, isn't it? It's hard. I mean, I don't know. My advice is sort of a bit sketchy, really, because I basically had to sort of barricade myself in a room. And I think it is really hard to make time for yourself, definitely. But where there's a will, there's a way. I mean, some of the people I've met along the way have done some of their own businesses. They literally are doing it when, you know, they put their kids to bed at night and then they sit up doing it through the night. So I don't know. If that works for you. Does that work for you? Probably not. Any hiccups? Yes, there was one bit where Jessie, actually, my 5-year-old, deleted about 10,000 words. Actually, I don't think it was him. It might have been Mickey. One of the small kids, anyway, bashed my computer, and everything I've been working on for the last couple of days just went. And that was a bit of a fraught moment. But I was worried I wouldn't be able to.
Okay, question then here from Emma, who says, did you think about how your children might read this book in years to come? And did it influence what you wrote? Were you able to compartmentalize the writing? And does separating out the plates help you to be able to spin them all? So 2 questions there. Did you think about your children reading the book later on? Did that influence you? And then how do you separate out, how do you deal with the plate spinning?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I talk a bit in the book about I'm quite good at compartmentalizing. I think it really helps me deal with lots of different stuff going on at once. That's quite a useful thing, I think. And then with the writing, they're very welcome to read any of it, actually. I think my eldest, well, no, my eldest, I don't know if he'll bother, but the next one down, Kit, he's 12. He's already like, I'm going to listen to it on Audible. And I just said to him, okay, well, look, you know, there's some bits in it that you need to know then from me before you listen to it. And we spoke about it. He was fine. I mean, it's there are some, grown up themes, but overall, I'm aware that there's a chance they might listen to stuff or read it. To be honest, I just don't think they'll be that interested. I think they'll probably zone out. I mean, it's their mum. Like, it's just going to be this limited appeal, isn't there? But there's no conversation I'm scared to have with them. I'm totally fine with that. And if it brings up something, I was raised by someone who's quite good at making things age appropriate, and I believe I can do the same. So ask me again in a year for how I fared, I'd say. Yeah.
Pete says, I saw Sophie when she supported George Michael. Is there a favourite artist that she's toured with? And of course, you were a support act for Take That.
Yeah, I've done quite a lot of support gigs. I credit the support gigs as really having taught me a lot, actually, because there's nothing that makes you hone your craft like walking onto thousands of people waiting to see someone else. It's like really sharpens the senses. So yeah, the George Michael gigs were amazing in terms of seeing him live. Like, his voice was so beautiful, but sadly I never met him. So that's the bit that I always feel a bit of a disappointment to people, because they'll say, what was he like? And I'm like, I don't really know. But I did love to Take That tour, because that was 34 dates, which was a very long tour, and they were just very generous hosts, and we got on really well, and it was a really happy tour. And I've supported Elton John, which is amazing as well, and you get to watch him play. Yeah, I like doing the support gigs. I'm all for that. It's fun.
There's a Robbie Williams story in there as well, but we don't have time for that. There's so much we
It all ends happily, though.
Yeah, all ends happily. And just two more very quickly. Yuri wants to know whether you'll tour the US.
I'll go wherever wants me, actually. I'm not fussy. I'll go anywhere. I've got a passport. I'll be there.
And this is a nice question, anonymous question. Do you believe in fate and soulmates? When you met Richard, was there a sense of familiarity and comfort, or butterflies? Or maybe both?
I don't know if I do. Oh, that's really hard. I don't know if I do believe in it in a sort of, it's not something I was kind of waiting to strike me, but I'm definitely someone that feels like life is very good. And so I guess humans, we're quite hard not to believe in fate in any way, aren't we? It's part of how we talk about things, isn't it? I definitely haven't given over to chaos theory exactly, even though I admit that's probably what's going on most of the time. So I don't know. Soulmates, this just works. I'm happy.
I've got to say, Ali says, thank you for being so candid, and looking forward to seeing you at the Palladium in March.
Oh, I can't wait. Bloody love the Palladium. I had such a good gig there last time. Yeah, we're doing a kitchen disco tour, so I want to do a different set every night, do loads of covers, just have fun with people. It'd be great.
It sounds such good fun. And the little folk nursery rhymes Cat, I think, says, hey, lovely Sophie, your podcast is completely brilliant. We haven't talked much about the podcast, but you said you've done 40 interviews. She wants to know who'd be your ultimate woman to interview, but she says she's got so much for it, being a mum of two boys, running a small business, and trying to crowbar and finishing an album of her own songs. So yeah, she also thinks you're bloody awesome, she says, to do Murder on the Dance Floor at the gorgeous Bowel Babes 40th. Was it totally amazing to do that? Take care, love from Kat.
Oh, thank you, Kat. Well, firstly, thank you very much for the podcast support. I feel like it's a really nice group of people that have joined me with that, both as guests and as listeners, actually. I like that little community very, very much. And yes, it was a delight to sing for Deborah at the weekend. I mean, it just never lost on me if someone wants, has a good association with your song, and particularly with Murder on the Dance Floor. That was Bowel Babe, Deborah's uni song, so all her uni mates were there, so that's really cute. Ideal guest. There's like so many people, everybody from like Jacinda Ardern to Angelina Jolie, like basically anyone I read about that's like sounds like an amazing woman, I'm like, please have a kid, and then I can just approach you. So, and some of my favorites have been people that definitely aren't famous, but they've just got amazing stories to tell. There's some incredible folk out there. Yeah.
So if it's so good to spend this time with you. It's a little longer than 5 minutes, possibly even longer than we spent for our Telegraph interview all those years ago, but it is absolutely as fun as both of those. It's so nice to see you well and happy, and you're a real inspiration to so many people. And as I said, the fact that you sort of, you can really communicate with people just means that they want to reach out to you, and you're such a sort of happy presence in the public sphere. So long may that continue. And your book is absolutely fascinating. It's really gripping. People can get it. It's called Spinning Plates, and it's available in bookshops and online, isn't it? I think
it comes out on Thursday. I'm like, I'm really looking forward to just being out now. Just like, okay, just do it. Just pull the plaster off. Just do
I
it.
know you might end up in a head-to-head like you were with Victoria Beckham in the charts to get to number one. Who knows?
No way, no way. But I'm just, it's the book that I wanted to write, so that's a good feeling.
And good work with the podcast. Good luck with all the
Yeah.
upcoming events as well. And this will no doubt be turned into a How to Academy podcast. So thank you for that. Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, for asking great questions and being part of it. It was really fun to share this. What are we? Are we Monday? Yeah, we're a Monday evening. Really good to spend this Monday evening with you. And thanks again so much, Sophie.
Yeah, thank you to you and to everybody who joined us.